heavy is the head that wears the crown? If so, there are few heads as heavy as that of T1's Faker. It's rare for there to be a singular person who stands at the undisputed best in a field as competitive as the LOL esports scene. We've seen Micheal Jordan in basketball, Tiger Woods in golf, and Lee Sang-hyeok, the Unkillable Demon King, as Faker in League. He's taken home the World Championship 5 times. He's more World Championships under his belt than entire regions. Through triumph and trial, Faker has stood as the greatest player of all time. But what about him really kept him at the top for so long, despite the steep competition? There have been 2 phases to Faker's career, and we'll study them both to better understand what makes him the GOAT. Faker really got famous for one thing: being unreasonably clutch. During the 2010s, every highlight compilation had a Faker play on it. The sheer mechanical prowess, inhuman hand-eye coordination, supernatural game sense, and the ability to seemingly just not die created a lot of the clips that got me and my brother into the game. If you want an example of just how cracked Faker's mechanics were, you really don't need to look further than his debut game with SKT. He was in lane against one of the top 3 mid laners in Korea at the time, Ambition. Faker seems to kill Ambition with little to no difficulty. It was insane to see one of the best players of that season seemingly just stand there and die. What's even crazier is realizing how Faker did it. He noticed Ambition's Kha'Zix evolving and used those moments where he couldn't move to kill him. Kha'Zix's evolution takes around 2 seconds. Let's wrap our heads around that. Faker noticed Ambition hit level 6 and start evolving, bursted him down under the tower, and made a clean getaway in 2 seconds. This was so fast, even the commentators couldn't wrap their heads around it.
I was curious to see how well Captain Jack would do in this lane, because he's been typically a relatively weak lane.
Whoa, Ambition! What, Faker?
Despite how crazy this was, the point the world really saw who Faker was in the final match of the OGN finals in his debut year.
그러니까 직대로 안 보이잖아요. 얼굴이 보내방에서.
아, 그렇네요.
네.
자, 그래도 이번에 페이커 엄청난 피지컬 컨트롤.
This was the Faker that earned him the title of the Unkillable Demon King. It was this spectacular win that gave SKT a place in the 2013 World Championships, where they didn't just win, but they won spectacularly, clearing the finals in a 3-1 clean sweep. Faker asserting his dominance in the league from his first season, and he was already considered the best player of all time. He was a prodigy on a team of prodigies, from a country of prodigies. This was Faker as an ace. SKT and Faker would go on to win LCKs like it was their birthright, adding 2 more world trophies to their shelves. Faker was a king in his prime, and the LOL esports scene was his kingdom. There seemed to be nothing that could really be done about his dominance. Sure, he didn't always win, but every time Faker wasn't the champion, it felt like a brief respite for someone else to enjoy the limelight before he claimed it back. And he always claimed it back. Until he couldn't. This success couldn't last forever. Every ruler, no matter how powerful, must one day step down. After 2016, SKT hit a slow patch with Worlds. They would make it to the finals in 2017, but lose in a harsh 3-0 sweep against Samsung Galaxy. That ended with Faker being caught out by Ruler with a flash R that cascaded down to the destruction of SKT's Nexus.
The upset is complete as the kills come through. The SKT dynasty is over. All hail the new king.
They came close to victory, but walked away empty-handed, devastating Faker and fans around the world. This was the first time Faker had made it to the finals and lost. T1, desperate to hold on to their former glory, switched out their players to try and better match Faker, an experiment that they hoped would revitalize the team. An experiment that would ultimately fail. they would only get one win in 5 games at the start of the 2018 season and barely managed to scrape their way into the playoffs. But this was as far as they would make it. This would mark the first year that they wouldn't attend MSI since the tournament was created, and despite all of Faker's skill, it seemed like there was nothing he could do about it. T1 had seemingly lost its fire and would continue to look that way. These were the dark ages of T1 and what could have been the end of Faker's legacy. In the summer of that same year, SKT failed to even make it to the playoff. The man who was once hailed as the Unkillable Demon King couldn't even qualify for Worlds. The other members of SKT seemed unable to match his brilliance, and as great as he was, League is still a team sport. No matter how good one man was, he was still just one man. And the realization of this is what made Faker change into who he is now. When he dominated Worlds in 2013, he came in as a skilled rookie, a prodigy, an ace, but that was far from the case by the 2020s. He was not just a veteran at that point, he was the veteran, the oldest professional player in the LCK, and what most people had held as the standard for close to a decade. There were countless players all across the nation and the world that looked up to Faker, and both he and T1 would use that to their advantage. Now, it's important to note that Faker never really fell off mechanically, even in the darkest times of T1. He was consistently pulling off amazing plays. The issue was clearly his teammates. So Faker made a switch. He wouldn't play as the ace or the prodigy, but would step into the role of a veteran mentor fully. And that meant getting new players. A lot of them. In 2019, SKT dropped most of their roster, and Faker was officially made the team captain. He focused more on his team, building them up and turning them into the beasts he needed to stand beside him. And it worked. They bounced back from their worst season and won in LCK in glorious fashion against Griffin, the team that seemed the most ready to take the title of best in the region. And it wasn't even close. Maybe, just maybe, T1 was back to peak form. Maybe after 2 years off the throne, Faker would finally ascend it once again and lift the Summoner's Cup. But first, he had to set his sights on MSI. Now, at this point, the climate in League was quite different. Faker's loss in 2017 wasn't just the end of his legacy, but also the last time Korea had won Worlds. Faker was hoping to win MSI not just for himself, not just for his team, but for his whole nation to reassert their dominance. However, Faker was unable to secure a win against G2 and failed to reach the finals. Korea as a whole would be a no-show, and though it was just a stepping stone to Worlds, it showed a crack in the new T1. At a time when the world, and Faker, were looking for someone to bolster their confidence in the new team, they just got disappointment instead.
Has thrown down a wall, he's got vision. The claw will tag Mata. Mickey's going to be in range as well. There's no flash available, and he may need to Justice Punch over the wall. Baron has been interrupted. Teddy is trying to step forward. The taunt is going to come out. Caps is trying to find the kill. Mata's in trouble. Faker's low, but they've already got one onto Mata. Where is Teddy? Follow his HP bar. Khan flashes up the wall. Teddy's dead. Jankos is in the pit. G2 Esports have been gifted and donated a Baron from SKT. That's a dunk from Wonder. Death from below for the double, for the ace, for the Baron and the base.
G2 obliterate SKT. Look at all the death timers. They're looking to stamp their authority onto the SK Telecom dynasty and make their way to the final.
Baron empowered minions are pushing into the base. The gap be damned. Champions can fall, gods can bleed. Where were you when the West rose up to conquer champions? G2 Esports eliminates SK Telecom. North America face Europe in the MSI Finals.
However, they still had the chance to prove themselves in Worlds, assuming they qualified this year. And sadly, that was also still looking shaky. SKT almost immediately went on a 5-game losing streak when the season started, yet somehow managed to qualify for the playoff at the very bottom of the barrel. With all the odds stacked against them, and confidence in the new team plummeting by the minute, they showed just how dominant they still were. They made it to the finals and beat out Griffin once again to secure a spot at Worlds. They were undoubtedly the best in Korea. In the past, that would have meant you were the best in the world. Faker had built a team that seemed to be able to actually stand beside him. He'd trained them and led them back to the world stage. But if they were to proceed to the finals, they would first need to face off against G2, the very same team that snatched MSI from his grasp. It was the chance he needed to prove to everyone that he was still the king in LOL. And he lost. Again. This should have been it for Faker. Anyone else would have hung up the mouse and keyboard and retired. He would still have gone down in history as one of the greatest of all time, but he didn't get the title of Unkillable from giving up. SKT dropped most of their roster again in 2020, and at this point, no one but Faker remained from the original SKT. They would do anything to find a team that seemed worthy to stand beside Faker. They managed to secure a seat at World in 2021 and showed spectacular form, but lost again in the semifinals to DWG KIA. It was close, but again, Faker fell short. In 2022, Faker managed to push through. Despite going undefeated in the LCK regular season, SKT was far from the favorite choice for Worlds, yet he took his team to the finals. It was a hard-fought battle against DRX for 4 games, and T1 was 1 game away from finally regaining their throne. The final game came down to 1 fight. If T1 won, they would become World's 2022 champions. But history repeated itself. Much like the loss in 2017 that kick-started this dark age, Faker got to the finals, but 1 match away from victory, he lost it all. It felt like T1, despite all their effort and all they'd done, was right back where they started. Faker was a has-been. Sure, he was still mechanically sound, but the league had just moved past him. Now, for sure, this was the end of his dynasty. The 2023 season started off, and it seemed to do everything it could to put the final nail in Faker's coffin. SKT came second in the spring LCK and were a series short of MSI. And what made this so bad was that there was no real reason for this. They weren't playing especially poorly, they didn't have a lack of talent or synergy, they just seemed to not be good enough to be dominant in the current climate of League. Yet, it was at the darkest point in the season that Faker showed he was truly the leader he had worked so hard to become. During the summer season, T1 had lost 7 of 8 matches. Faker was benched due to a wrist injury, and it felt like they'd fallen apart completely. With 2 games left and their chance to qualify for Worlds on the line, Faker returned and barely managed to scrap his team into Worlds. But to a lot of people, it didn't mean much. Faker couldn't raise the Summoner's Cup when the odds were stacked in his favor. He couldn't do it with a revitalized team. Even when he got to the finals, he still couldn't manage to pull through. Now, in 2023, when he barely managed to get the team he trained to scrape into Worlds, no one expected much. In the years following the crushing defeat in 2017, T1 failed to qualify twice, and when they did, they were either kicked out in the best of 5s, or painfully as the runners-up. And this year, if he planned to change that, Faker would have to go up against the very man who caught him out in his loss in 2017, Ruler, who was now part of JDG. JDG were the easy favorites for Worlds. They had won both local tournaments and MSI. They were the current giants on their way to take the throne. If they were the Goliath, T1 was David, and over the last 6 years, Faker had gotten used to being the underdog. Both teams tore through the group stages and quarterfinals, until Faker had to face off against the very man that humbled him, the man who reshaped the course of Faker's whole career. Now, surrounded by the best players he's ever been with, he plans to redeem himself, and that he did. Now, we need to remember what got Faker famous. It was his unreasonable mechanics. And though he settled into his role as mentor and captain, he was still the exact same beast. As if to right the wrongs of his past, he catches Ruler out, resulting in a landslide victory that destroys JDG's mental. They win the next game and advance, once again, to the finals. Faker had shown that he wasn't the same man he was in 2017. His team had shown that they were worthy to stand behind him. Like Nosferatu rising out of his grave, the Unkillable Demon King was set to do something everyone hoped for, but no one really expected. He just had to win once more. It was a best-of-5 against Weibo Gaming. Just last year, Faker had gotten to this exact stage and at the last minute, choked. He wouldn't have that this time. No more close calls, no more hard-fought battles. The Unkillable Demon King came to dominate, and dominate he did, cleaning out Weibo with a 3-0 sweep. Faker had done the unthinkable. Half a decade after he had lost his crown, he had managed, against all odds, to get it back, and he did it all with a broken wrist. And this was finally where we all thought it should have ended. Faker was a 4-time champion and the only member of the league's Hall of Fame. He was the greatest of all time and had redeemed himself for his loss and losing streak from 2017. In a sport where the average age of retirement is 24, he was an elderly 27-year-old, old head, ripe and ready to retire. Faker, however, had other plans. He would go into the 2024 season with full steam. Anyone can win a crown, but only a true champion can defend it. But things didn't go exactly to plan. At this point, T1 seemed a shadow of the team that had that clean sweep in the World's Final just the previous year. In the opening series, T1 lost to Gen G, the rebranded Samsung Galaxy that had become their rival. The team that had a player who people saw as the new best mid laner, Chovy. They would lose again to Gen G in the finals of Spring LCK. At MSI, they wouldn't even reach the finals. In the summer, Faker would lose again to Chovy, and this wore on him heavily. It was as if the world wasn't just telling him he was a has-been, but showing him the exact person he should hand his crown over to. And for Faker, for all his strength, this was starting to break him. It wasn't just that his team lost. It was that he lost. He made mistakes, misplays, and was caught out by Gen G multiple times. There was no shuffling of the roster. There was no building up of new players. Faker, for the first time in his decade-long career, was the issue. His wrist was bad. He was past his prime, and constant DDoS attacks that season had stopped him from even being able to practice in solo queue. He had done everything he was expected to do and then some. Nobody wanted to watch their idol break down, and we all felt that he had done more than enough to finally give himself a breather. But SKT was just able to barely scrape their way into Worlds, somehow managing to be even more of an underdog this year despite being the reigning champions. They started the series with a disappointing loss against Top Esports, doing very little to build up the ever-waning confidence fans had in the team and in its leader. However, from this point on, Faker would lead his team undefeated until they met Top Esports again in the quarter-final. This time, Faker was in peak form. T1 locked in a spot at the semifinals against the very team that had stopped them the entire season. The very team that handed Faker his loss in 2017. Gen G, formerly known as Samsung Galaxy. Faker would be in lane against Chovy, the person who everyone expected to end his career. Yet, despite all this, Faker stood his own. I feel his most triumphant win came when he died. In that exact spot 7 years ago, Faker was caught out.
The arrow connecting on Tona, Chains of Corruption just try and buy some space with the flash onto Faker, the knock up, and he's dead. Pieces arrows follow him into the death chamber as the impale is decent. Ona's still alive, he's so tanky, and it's Kobayushi taking matters into his own hands. The spears go wide and the coffee goes down. It's a double kill for the Skarner, and Chovy's still alive. There's a bit of damage, but he gets over the wall, flashes, but the bone skewer finds him. The shutdown for Goomer and T1. They want to go to London. It's only Canyon versus the world here as T1 are taking down their first inhibitor of the game. They are not done yet. Nexus turrets stand between them and another final. He goes golden. He's holding onto the wave. He wants to take it down. He does. But another one is conga lining in. Lahens, he knows he just has to move it away from these Nexus turrets. And he is able to stall it out. Another teleport. Faker does come back. And they'll now get their time. It is Guma that's able to melt these turrets. And Chen-Chi for the last 2 years.
It was with a play almost identical to this. And the dark ages of T1 began. But now, Faker had a team that could stand beside him. What once destroyed him now served as the catalyst for SKT's first victory in 10 series against Gen G. This was the ultimate proof that the chances Faker made on the cusp of his loss in 2017 were correct. He had built up what might be the greatest team of all time, led by the greatest players of all time. There was only one thing left to do to cement this: win the finals. The only issue? They were going up against BLG, the most dominant team in China. Oh, and T1 had never won a best of 5 against them. Ever. This was tough for Faker. T1 conceded first blood in every game in the series, and BLG had a 2-1 lead. All BLG had to do to lift the cup was to beat T1 one more time, and that would be it. No matter how prospective a team, there is no trophy for second place. But even if there was one, Faker had no plans of taking it. SKT manages to win 2 games in a row and do what seemed so inevitable a few matches ago, yet so impossible earlier that season, and they become the world's 2024 champions, setting up a new dynasty built not just with his talent, but with the people around him. Faker came in as a mechanical genius, someone who was great at everything that could make a player great, yet when that wasn't enough, he went above and beyond, pulling everything out of his bag of tricks and learning a few more along the way. He became the leader he needed to be and built the team he needed. Faker is the GOAT simply because no one else could do what he does. No one else could have such a dominant reign twice in the same field 7 years apart. It's as if he just simply refuses to leave his prime. Whether it was a wrist injury, DDoS attacks, or declining mental health, nothing seems to be able to stop the unkillable Demon King.